Hello and welcome to a special session of Mind Rocks. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Now this session is special because my guest on Mind Rocks literally rocks the literary world. Author Amish Tripathi, the youngest director of the Nehru Centre at London. Amish is the author of 9 books including the Shiva trilogy, the Ramchandra series and the immortal India, the legend of Sohail Dev. Amish, welcome to Mind Rocks, where we discuss learning in times of COVID, lessons for the young.
Thanks, Gaurav. Always a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Amish, how have you been coping in these very difficult COVID times?
The way I see it, there's no point getting into a negative mind frame. What has happened has happened. We have to live. We have to live with it. And I think our philosophies, our ancient philosophies, help us through this. I've passed through my own, personal pain as well over the last 5-6 years. The career has done well, but on the personal life, that's the way the universe balances itself, I guess. My family has been through difficult times.
You lost your father. I'm really sorry to to hear this. You lost your father, late Vinay Tripathi ji, just last month. How have you coped with this?
It was a difficult time, and like I said, my family we've lost a lot of people over the last 5-6 years. There have been health troubles, some tragically, and even my father passed away very suddenly, and I rushed back. But look, I mean, if there was a Pandit who told us that it's a blessing to pass away peacefully. It's more difficult for the family left behind. But my father was working till the last morning, and the responsibility is up to us children to carry it forward. He was, as you know, an inventor, a scientist. We announced a massive discovery that he had made just 2 months back. We were very happy about it. That's why it is so much of a shock that we lost him so suddenly after that. But my twin brother, Ashish, and my elder brother, Anishda, they are driving the company, and we will carry his legacy forward.
Does our culture, does our religion help you and help people who seem to follow this scope better?
I think so, yes. Look, the dharmic religions, I'm not belittling or any other religion. Every religion has its strengths and areas of improvements. But the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, essentially treat you like an adult, not as a child who has to be given a list of do's and don'ts. The dharmic religions essentially give you philosophies, and tell you that, look, life will have its ups and downs. And in fact, Gautam Buddha put it front and center when the first of his 4 noble truths was that the reality of the universe is grief. That is the first fundamental reality. And you can cope with it only if you accept it. You suffer when you start thinking about mere saath ye sab kyun ho raha hai. You don't suffer when you realize, yaar, sabke saath ho raha hai. There's a reality of life. That is not going to give you purpose. That is not going to give you happiness.
Through your writings, you're once again trying to bring us back to our family values, to our culture, to our history, to our community values. What is your advice to today's youngsters in terms of how to cope with these COVID times?
Yeah, there is no one who can escape grief. All of us have a share of it, right? What gets us through it is actually our close friends and family. Those who are with you, a sense of family, a sense of community. And those who are with you through thick and thin, in my opinion, are never more than 5, maybe 10 people. Those who will die for you without a second thought. Those who you will die for. And in India, fortunately, the way our traditions are, you can be traditional and liberal at the same time. You don't have that choice in most other countries. Like in the West, they've taken liberalism to such an extreme that they've destroyed all traditions. Most sense of community, which is not good. You're lonely, right? Yes. Or you'll find some Middle Eastern countries where the traditions are so strong that there's no space for liberalism. There's no space for women's rights. There's no space for LGBT rights. India can give you that fine balance. You can have the strength that comes from a sense of tradition, a sense of family, and you can have the freedom that comes with a sense of liberalism as well, because our traditions are by themselves liberal.
Absolutely. Okay, let's quickly get into a quick fire round. There are lots of questions that have come from youngsters and they want this celebrity Amish to answer these questions. Life's most important lessons from the pandemic as far as Amish is concerned.
Realizing what truly matters to you, man. I'm not saying don't chase your career. Of course, you must succeed in life. You have to work hard, but realize that there are other things to life outside of your career as well. Your family, your relations, your sense of community, your country. Spend time on that too. You'll realize that gives you that strength to get through such difficult times.
Very well said. So you're saying invest in spending time with your parents, with your siblings, with your friends. They are the only ones who will stand by you in a difficult moment. Now, 5 books according to you that every youth must read.
Okay. I mean, 2 very obviously the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, which are the entry into our scriptural traditions. Because I'm a Shaivite, I'll say the Shiv Puran. I think it works. You should check it out. the Rig Veda, if I might suggest that. Ideally, you should read it with a commentary, but do check it out. And the Ishtavasya Upanishad. It is the shortest Upanishad there is, but among the shortest, sorry. And but the depth in it, the depth of philosophies in it, are so fantastic. It can truly change your outlook to life. And if there's space for one more, read my books, man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as someone who's read all your books, I absolutely strongly recommend that for all our youngsters. It's such a great way to connect with the past and then with the present. 5 classics, Amish, according to you, that youth must read and possess.
Okay. You know, the Sanskrit word for a classic is Kal Jai, that which defeats time. It's a very deep word. And I would suggest a few books from our own traditions. One is Kalidasa's, Kumara Sambhava. It is about the birth of Lord Kartik, and you have to read of the way he described the love between Lord Shiva and Goddess Parvati. You know, those of us who think Indians are all conservative tradition, read that text. It is so beautiful, right? Then the one who Kalidasa wrote about as the greatest Sanskrit writer ever, which is Bhasa. So there's this text of his called Pancharatra, a completely, rebellious take on the Mahabharata. He changed the story completely, man. Bhasa, probably 2,500 years old. Check that out. Check Thiruvalluvar's Thirukural. Beautiful, poetry on 3 of the 4 Purusharthas. Deep philosophy. It takes a genius to convey philosophies to you through just 2 lines. It's actually couplets, and each couplet, conveys a philosophy that a lesser author like me would need an entire book for. Right? That was Thiruvalluvar's genius. I would suggest from the modern classics, S.L. Bhairappa, Parva. Certainly check him out. Brilliant author. And I would suggest Narendra Kohli's Mahasamar.
Recently, there was a function at Ayodhya at the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi to mark the first anniversary of the Bhumi Pujan for the construction of a Divya Bhavya Sri Ram temple at Ayodhya. Now, some would argue, why is a temple important in today's day and age when some say the focus should be perhaps on building more hospitals or schools or engineering colleges?
One is not saying that you shouldn't build hospitals and colleges, and those are being built, right? The number of medical college seats, for example, have more than doubled in the last 5 years. But one of the things our ancestors taught us is that to have a complete life, you need 4 Purusharthas. You need Artha, which is not just wealth. It's erroneously translated as wealth. It's wealth, fame, power, everything. We need to be a powerful country. So you need Artha. You need Kama, which is all the sensual pleasures of life, not just eroticism, music, dance, everything, right? You need Dharma and you need Moksha. You need all 4 to lead a complete life. And the temple is the heart of our Dharma. The temple is where we connect with our divine. The temple is where we connect with Lord Ram.
We need to connect with our roots, is what you're saying. We need to take pride in in our rich history, in our vibrant culture. Generations have been brought up perhaps to think that all of this is make believe. For example, the Pushpak Viman that we read about in the Ramayana. Now, history has taught us that the first flight was by Wright brothers in 1903. So, what was the Pushpak Viman all about in your view, Amish?
Look, the way I see it, there are things that we learn about from a metaphorical perspective, and there are things which are actually the history of science. Now, one of the things that many people don't know, there was a scientist in India who actually discovered the theory and actually showed it in practice a few years before the Wright brothers. But most of us Indians don't know this, right? We are not taught our own sciences, our own mathematics. Most of us don't know that Bodhayana discovered the Pythagoras theorem before Pythagoras did. Most of us don't know that plastic surgery was indeed practiced in ancient India. It is described in the texts of Sushruta and Charak. And there is a class of Indians which will believe things only when Westerners record it. So the first recorded nose reconstruction surgery in the modern world was recorded by a Westerner 300 years ago who recorded an Indian surgeon doing it on a soldier of the Maratha army 300 years ago. So a Westerner recorded it. Our metallurgical, our navigation techniques, we had, people keep saying, we are told that our ancestors never wrote anything down. We were an oral culture. It is utter bullshit. There are 3 million ancient Sanskrit manuscripts that have been tabulated by the National Mission of Manuscripts. That's more than the rest of the ancient world combined, by the way, combined. The number of ancient Greek manuscripts is just 20 to 30,000. Our ancestors, 3 million. Despite the Nalanda University being destroyed, Takshashila being destroyed, most of those texts are actually not religious texts. They're scientific texts, mathematical texts, physics, chemistry, medicine. We haven't studied our own sciences, so we don't know. We don't know the achievements of our own ancestors, and we're not building on it. The fault is with our education system, which needs to be reformed ASAP.
Oh, absolutely. And since you were mentioning about surgery and Sushrut and Charak, when we speak of Lord Ganesh, for example, elephant head, human body, did we have that kind of advanced knowledge of surgery? Were we far more evolved than we are, or even to reach that stage even today?
Lord Ganesh's story again is metaphorical. Because the core belief in that is the acquisition of knowledge through detachment. And in fact, I had written on this in one of my books, which is why Lord Ganesh is considered the god of the writers, not just because he wrote the Mahabharata, but because he was the most intelligent. But there is enough evidence of, very advanced surgery in ancient times. There are descriptions of surgical instruments in Sushruta and Charaka's text. If I remember correctly, some 52 surgical instruments. They had stitching techniques for wounds in those days, where they used a herb called dadichi, which would actually leave no scars and which was itself an antiseptic. Imagine the stitch itself was antiseptic. We were seriously advanced, and we lost most of it in the last 1,000 years, but much more rapidly in the last 200, 300 years. We have to revive it.
Perhaps you're absolutely right. And is that effort actually happening? Are we moving in that direction? Are your writings or your effort a step to at least attempt to open minds in our country? A desire by the next generation to know more about our history and our culture. Do you see that change happen?
I think the demand is certainly there. I'm sure our youngsters, and I've sensed it whenever I've interacted, most of my readers are actually the youth. When I interact with them, they want to learn these things. The problem is, frankly, with our generation and with the so-called establishment, that we are not helping the youngsters learn all this. Our syllabus needs to change. Our history texts need to change. The way we teach science needs to change. The way we teach medicine, we need to teach of our own traditions first. And then teach the Western traditions as well. But in the modern way, we teach only Western traditions and nothing of our own traditions. And this and you see the problems that this causes across our, like Vastu Shastra, for example, is not actually about superstition. It is a deeply scientific way to build buildings in our own climate, right? Because what is an architecture technique for Western Europe doesn't work in India. Glass wall buildings work very well in Western Europe. It's a cold country with a shortage of cold countries with a shortage of sun, right? But glass wall buildings in India is essentially a giant microwave oven
absolutely.
where there's no shortage of sun. We need to use our own techniques, which is there in the Vastu Shastra, but we don't teach them, right? The fault is with the system that we don't teach these things.
Let me pose an example to you from COVID times. Western medicine, everyone approves. The moment you talk about Ayurveda, there is such a hue and cry about Ayurveda being bunkum, and it happens even in today's day and age.
Again, that shows biases. Actually, there is enough textual evidence and very good research being done by AIIMS and by the Ayush Ministry, which institutions have been set up, which shows the science behind Ayurveda. But the science behind Ayurveda is there in our ancient texts as well. So, I'm not, from what I know, homeopathy, I admit, is perhaps doesn't have as much science behind it. It's not ours in any case, but Ayurveda does. And Ayurveda, the approach to health in Ayurveda is fundamentally different from the approach of Western medicine. Western medicine is very symptomatic driven and relief of symptoms. It doesn't look at a holistic approach of solving problems at the root, often, right? Because monetary incentives are not aligned with it. But Ayurveda is a holistic system. It actually sets your body back into balance. I think, using both Ayurveda and Western medicine, Ayurveda to maintain your health, Western medicine when there's a crisis, would actually lead to better health outcomes.
There's another aspect that I wanted to raise now that we're having this conversation. We've recently, celebrated the second year of abrogation of Article 370, and some seem to be harping on that special status of the only, if I may, Muslim majority state being taken away. But Kashmir also has a very rich historic connection to Lord Shiv, and you've written about it very extensively. Tell our viewers more about Lord Shiv, Shaivism and Jammu and Kashmir.
Kashmir was actually, at some periods in our history, the intellectual heartland of India, and especially of Shaivism. So I, as a Shaivite, really, adore, look up to Kashmir. Around a millennia ago, Abhinava Gupta, who was a Kashmiri polymath, perhaps one of the finest intellectuals India ever had. His texts on Tantra, on Shaivism, on religious philosophy, on poetry, on dramatics. You can imagine the talent of that great man. And sadly, we learn very little about him. There was a university in ancient Kashmir called Sharda Peeth, which is presently in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And of course, Nalanda, Takshashila, Ujjaini, Mahadevpuram, they were great. Vikramshila were great, massive universities. Sharda Peeth was perhaps a little smaller, but the quality of intellectual output that used to come from there was of a very, very high order. Sadly, it was attacked in the invasions that happened on Kashmir, again by the Turks, and destroyed. And then you find that the quality of intellectual output started declining, from there. And going back to what I was saying earlier, that we need to have a balance in all our strengths. That of course we need we need that warrior spirit to defend our country, from invaders. We need the ability to make money, to defend. We need artists who come out with beautiful art.
Yes.
But we need the intellectuals as well, who can help guide all of us. We are not intellectuals. I mean, intellectuals are those who come up with primary theories, which then those of us can absorb and try and learn and try and explain and understand in our own lives. We need that, those intellectuals as well, which our ancient universities used to produce. Sadly, our modern universities do not honestly produce fresh intellectual output. Most of them are actually just copy pasting Western theories and replacing Indian terms on it, which is why to most of us who are not intellectuals, those theories make very little sense
Yes.
because they don't connect to the real India. And once I've come to the West and seen Western theories from these universities, now I can connect to the theories that our intellectuals tell us in India, and I realize which is that actually those theories are just Western theories, and they're replacing Western terms with Indian terms. So white patriarchy, Brahminical patriarchy.
Yes.
Which is, if you ask me, a little bizarre, because actually the most powerful Brahmin male ruler in human history was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, actually. Who's a hero to them. And before that, the most powerful Brahmin male ruler was probably Pushyamitra Shunga. Before that, Ravan. Otherwise, we've had no Brahmin male rulers ruling much of India. The Mauryas were not upper caste. The Guptas were not upper caste. The Marathas were not upper caste. So actually replacing Western theories with Indian terms doesn't connect to India. We need to build our own theories. And I'm not saying everything about India is perfect. There are some good, there are some bad. But we need to have our own
But that's
theories,
what
which
life
our
actually
intellectuals
teaches you, to take the good with the bad. Now, but for one successful Amish, there may be hundreds, perhaps thousands of authors who haven't succeeded. What would your advice be to those authors?
Bro, my suggestion always, write with your heart. किताब चले ना चले वो भगवान के ऊपर. Your book has to be the voice of your soul, right? Be true to it. If it has to succeed, it will. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Actually write your book with that perspective. There is, of course, the practical side. You need to pay bills here. So, and if you're not born to a wealthy family, as I wasn't, then you need to be practical. Have a job on the side. Let that pay the bills. Keep your writing pure.
Keep your writing pure.
History decide whether it'll work or not.
I will let that be the last word. But of course, before I let you go, you've also said India's spiritual approach is based on exploration, not faith. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, in ancient Vedic Sanskrit, there was no translation for the English word blasphemy. So there are two broad groups of religions. And I'm not deriding any side. Every path has its strengths and weaknesses. The dharmic religions, it's more about the search for wisdom. You can have faith or you may not have faith. That is not central. There are some schools of philosophy where faith is important. Many schools of philosophy in the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, they don't have faith. Sankhyas, Mimamsas, Jaina, Buddha, they don't believe in a creator God. Whereas the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, faith is very central. That is the heart of it. You have to believe in God. So our way, the dharmic way, is more about the quest for knowledge, the quest for wisdom, or even if you're not following the Gyan Yoga, the quest for bhakti, the quest for karma. Faith is not central. You'll find most interestingly, I don't know if you read the Pew religious survey recently. Indian Muslims and Indian Christians actually also believe in karma, actually also believe in questioning God. That's what the Pew survey actually showed.
Yes.
Which is what I've always held. Indian Muslims, Indian Christians, they are unique. They're very different from how Muslims and Christians behave in many other countries.
And
they are much more open-minded, much more liberal.
And that is why perhaps you're doing much better than many other countries in the world. But as always, it's such a pleasure talking to you, Amish. Many, many thanks for joining me. The last word that you actually said should be perhaps followed by all. It's also there in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Do thy duty. Reward is not thy concern. Amish, many thanks for joining me.
Thank you.